If you would, open your Bibles to Ruth. This morning we'll be looking together at chapter 3. And pick up where we left off a couple of weeks ago. I want to go ahead and begin reading as you turn in your Bibles there to Ruth. Chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. We'll be looking at the whole chapter. Here we read, "Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, 'My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maid you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. It shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do.' She said to her, 'All that you say I will do.' So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. It happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled, and he bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. He said, 'Who are you?' And she answered, 'I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative.' Then he said, 'May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you ask, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. Now, it is true I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Remain this night, and when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you, as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning.' So she lay at his feet until morning and rose before one could recognize another. And he said, 'Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor.' Again he said, 'Give me the cloak that is on you and hold it.' So she held it, and he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her. And she went into the city. Then she came to her mother-in-law. She said, 'How did it go, my daughter?' And she told her all that the man had done for her. She said, 'These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said, do not go to your mother-in-law empty-handed.' And then she said, 'Wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he has settled it today.'" When we read this, it's obviously a love story. This is a romance, and it's like a romance novel in ways, but it's not dirty, it's not vulgar, it's a very clean one. And actually, as we read this, what we see is a beautiful picture of providence. We see how God is working out the plans of people to achieve and accomplish His own superior sovereign purposes and plans. As Proverbs 16:9 says, "The mind of man plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps." And similarly in Proverbs 19:21, "Plans are in a man's heart, but the counsel of the Lord will stand." So we see that God is bringing about His sovereign purposes and plans. And as we read this, what I almost want to hear playing in the background as we read these verses is Rascal Flatts, "God Bless the Broken Road," because I would love to have that playing. The words of that, of course, is the chorus is every long lost dream led me to where you are. Others who broke my heart were like northern stars, pointing me on my way into your loving arms. This much I know is true, that God blessed the broken road that led me straight to you." And then he sings, "I think about the years I spent just passing through. I'd like to have the time I lost and give it back to you, but you just smile and take my hand. You've been there, you understand." And here's how it kind of fits into the text. It's all part of a grander plan that's coming true. And so she says, now I'm just rolling home into my lover's arms, and this much I know is true, that God blessed the broken road that led me straight to you. And we see that God is in fact blessing this broken road that Naomi's been on. He's blessing this broken road that Ruth has been on. He's accomplishing His own sovereign purposes and plans. And again, remember, as we look at the book of Ruth, I think another song that needs to be continually on repeat in our mind is that song, God Moves in Mysterious Ways. God moves in a mysterious way, His wonders to perform. He plants His footsteps in the sea. He rides upon the storm. And then we looked at the verse that said, judge not the Lord by feeble sense, but trust Him for His grace. Behind a frowning providence, He hides a smiling face. His purposes will ripen fast, unfolding every hour. The bud may have a bitter taste, but sweet will be the flower. And then also, ye fearful saints, fresh courage take. The clouds ye so much dread are big with mercy and shall break in blessings on your head. So we've seen that Naomi and Ruth has come out of the clouds. The light began to come on. Last chapter, we looked at chapter 2. Naomi remembers, oh, there is a kinsman redeemer who can pick up and do what a son would have done, a close relative that can marry, so that Ruth can continue to carry on the family name, so that the line would not be broken. Of course, this is the line that the Messiah would come, the Redeemer would come, and so she would be able to keep her inheritance. And that's what we saw taking place last week in verse 19 and 20 of chapter 2. Naomi, it says, and her mother-in-law said to her, where did you go and glean or reap the wheat, the harvest today, and where did you work? May he who took notice of you be blessed. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, the name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed of the Lord, who has not withdrawn His kindness to the living and the dead. And again, Naomi said to her, the man is our relative. He is one of our closest relatives. So Naomi begins to see things turning around. It's like, oh yeah, God is in fact causing all things ultimately to work for the good, even though back in the storms of Moab, I did not remember that. In the loss of her husband and her sons, she had seemed to had forgotten that. She had forgotten that it was all going to work for a good. But we see it beginning to turn around, and then we come to chapter 3, and what I want us to see here is I want us to see four things, and I want to go ahead and give you these four things, and then hopefully I can go back and put some meat on the bones. I think what we see taking place here in verses 1 through 5, you can write this down, what we see is a purposeful plan. And what we see taking place in verses 6 through 9 is a peculiar practice. And then we see in verses 10 through 15 proper priorities. And then we see in the remaining verses, specifically verse 18, patience in providence, specifically patience in God's providence. And now I want us to go back and look at these verses together more in depth. But even before we do that, what I want you to take note of, and I want you to write this or take note of this verse just in case I forget to note it, because this is huge. As we look at verse 3. If you look back in chapter 2, look at verses 11 and 12. Boaz replied to her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully reported to me, and how you left your father and your mother in the land of your birth and came to a people that you did not previously know. May the Lord reward your work, and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. Now that's huge. That's going to be huge as we look at this. Now the first thing we see in chapter 3 is a purposeful plan. Look back there with me. It says, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now what Naomi's saying here is, I want to find you a husband. I want to help you find a husband so that you can be married, have family, raise a family, have children, But more specifically, she says at the end of this, now is not Boaz our kinsman with whose maid you were? And so she's again trying to say, oh yeah, here's the guy who's going to do what we read of in Deuteronomy, what we read of in Leviticus, where the close relative, either a son would marry a widow or a close relative would marry the widow so that the name, they could raise up offspring, continue the family name, she could keep the inheritance. And that's what we see here. It is a purposeful plan. Naomi is planning. Her plan has purpose. It's to protect Ruth, to provide for Ruth, and so that the line could continue. And so she could preserve the line of Elimelech, preserve the line of Mahlon, ultimately preserve the line of the Redeemer, the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And so she says, now is not Boaz our kinsman with whom your maids were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. So the harvest is over. Time has passed. Remember chapter 2, it says Boaz gives her permission to continue to reap the harvest until the end of the harvest season. So apparently the harvest season's over, and he's winnowing the wheat up at the threshing floor that night. Naomi comes up with this plan. Verse 3, she says, wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. To put this in modern-day terms, she's saying, put your past in the past, take off your clothes of mourning, take off your clothes of widowhood, dress up, slap on the perfume, turn it up, and go down and woo Boaz. Now, that's what she's saying. That's her plan. That's just my interpretation of that. But that's what she's saying. She's saying go down there. And she says, go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. It shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and you shall uncover his feet and lie down, and then he will tell you what you shall do. And she said, all that you say I'm going to do. So in a Baptist church, it's kind of hard to say, but she says, wait till he drinks enough to feel good, to have a little buzz, to be feeling happy. Not drunk, not drunk. It says, be ye not drunk with wine, but filled with the Spirit. It says, do not wait till he gets sloppy drunk. It says, wait till he's happy, till he's merry at heart. And when he's feeling good, you go in and you lie down at his feet. Now, this is very interesting when we get here and we read this. You shall go down and uncover his feet and lie down. Now, I'm going to hold off on that for just a second. And again, just want to remind you that this is a purposeful plan. It is to protect Ruth. It is to provide for her a husband, to preserve the line. And so that's point one. And then we get to point two. We see a peculiar practice. Well, obviously, I've already mentioned that. A peculiar practice, a peculiar custom in verses 6 through 9. It says, so she went down to the threshing floor after she had said, all that you say I will do. She went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, there he is, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came secretly and uncovered his feet, and she lay down. Now, I want to go ahead and say that's debated. People will debate this. They will say that it is a euphemism, meaning that they had sexual relations, but that's not the case, because you could see at verse 8, it says it happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and he woke up, and he says, who are you? But we know, I need to go ahead and say that we know the character of Boaz, right? It said in the last chapter, he was a man of God. He was well respected. He was a man that had a great name in the community, was esteemed in the community, and so we know that he was a godly man. We also know the character of Ruth. Ruth is a woman of virtue. She possibly is even the woman that Proverbs 31 is written about. We see she's a hard worker. She is a godly woman. She is doing the right thing. She works from sunup till sundown. She takes care of her family, Naomi at the time. And so we know the character of Ruth. We know the character of Boaz, and yet it says that she came down secretly and she uncovered his feet. Now, I want to be very careful with this, because some you can translate that word for feet elsewhere as other things. Let me just put it that way. and again, that would seem to imply that they had some sort of illicit sexual relationship there down at the threshing floor. And again, that would make people think this is the threshing floor was frequented by prostitutes. Prostitutes would come down there because it's after the harvest. They know that the men were going to have a lot of money, and so here they would come in the darkness of night, and they would try to get Johns or men to do things. And so interesting that we read that Ruth was told by Naomi to come down. But the key thing, again, is we know the character of Ruth and we know the character of Boaz, and that's been made plain, and it is throughout the remainder of this chapter. We see where Boaz says that you are a woman of worth, you are a woman of virtue, you're a woman of value. And so we need to go ahead and get that out of the way, because what the writer wants, I guess what the writer is wanting us to do is to understand that this is a pure proposal. Now, it is a peculiar practice, but it was customary. And what this actually is if you look at Ezekiel, if you look with me, back at Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 8. This is going to tie it all together. We'll understand more so what's going on. Now, I told you that Ruth chapter 2, verse 12 was a huge verse. And it's talking about where Boaz speaks to Ruth, and he esteems her because she had come under the wings of God. She had come under His grace. She was a God follower. And he says, may the Lord bless you for doing that. And then we see that in this chapter, in chapter 3, that she says, well, let me just go ahead and read this. Let's continue to read chapter 3 before we get to Ezekiel. It says, she went down to the threshing floor in verse 6. She did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came secretly, she uncovered his feet, and she laid down. And it happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled, and he bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative. So we read this and we say, what's going on here? Spread your skirt over me, some of your translations may say. Spread the corner of your garment over me, maybe some of your translations say. But it actually means spread your wings over me. That's exactly what we see Boaz blessing Ruth for, coming under the wings of God, coming under the grace of God in chapter 2. And here it says that she answered, I am Ruth, your maid, so spread your wings over your maid. Spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative. So she's seeking grace. She's seeking protection. She's seeking blessing and provision. And what's actually taking place is Boaz had prayed that she would find that God would bless her and that God would provide for her, that God would sustain her. And here we see that he's actually the answer to his own prayer. He's going to be the one that's going to protect and provide her, to give her grace. And so she's seeking it. Now what we have to read between the lines in chapter 2, and in chapter 2, remember I told you that we could see a budding romance. Boaz comes out into the field and he says, who is this woman? And so he took a liking to her, right? And then he says, okay, everybody else, y'all stay away from her. Don't mess with her. Don't touch her. Don't insult her. Don't hurt her. And here's what you can have. You can have grain. You go out and you harvest, and you can go here. Y'all intentionally leave her grain. So he protects her. He provides for her. And then he gives her this blessing. And this blessing is, you're rewarded. May you be blessed because you have come under grace, because you are worshiping the true and living God. Now, what we didn't know then, but what we see that Ruth did know, is that was Boaz's subliminal way of saying, you own me. I like you a lot. You are beautiful, and I want to protect you and provide for you and take care of you. But Boaz was an old man. I need to throw that in. We know that he's several years older than Ruth. And so he knows that there are younger men. He knows in his mind that there are other men that are more her age, that are readily available closer, and he's going to mention this other relative that's actually ahead of him in line to fulfill this duty. And so he steps back. He's taking his time. And so Ruth comes in and does this peculiar practice that was actually a custom, and she uncovers his feet in the night, and she asked him to spread his skirt, his garment, his wings over her. And we say, well, that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. But then we look in Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 8, and look there with me. And it says, "Then I passed by you and saw you, and behold, you were at the time for love. So I spread my skirt over you," or your cloak, "I spread my wings over you and covered your nakedness. I also swore to you and entered into a covenant with you, so that you became mine, declares the Lord." So here we see that God is covering Israel. God is covering Israel with His grace. He's spreading His wings over Israel, and this is a covenant. This is a marriage. And so God is saying, I covenant with you. I will cover you with grace, protect you, provide for you. You will be mine, like a marriage relationship. I'll be the groom. You'll be the bride. We see that with Christ in the church, right? He's going to cover His church with grace, protect and provide for. He covers us with His blood. We are in a covenant relationship with Him. He is the groom. We are the bride. And so we see that. That's what's taking place here. It is a peculiar practice, but this is actually what it is. It is a marriage proposal. She is proposing marriage to Boaz. That's what she's saying. Just like God covered Israel with His wings, He spread His skirt, He spread His garment over Israel. She says, I'm coming to you, and I want you to spread your grace. I want you to cover me, protect me, provide for me. I want you to be my husband. Now, Boaz said without said in chapter 2, I love you, and you are a woman of virtue. And people know what you've done. You are a godly woman, and because of that, you are the kind of woman that I would love to marry and to have as my own. So Ruth caught that. And so here she comes, and she says without saying, she doesn't say, marry me. She says, spread your skirt over me, cover me with your grace. And that is a marriage proposal. And so I know in our mind, in our secularized mind, in our sexualized mind, where the world we would think, oh, naturally it's going to lead to illicit sex and immorality this night. And if we were to turn it on ABC or CBS or NBC, we would expect it to come to that. And the writer is saying, purge that from your mind. This is not perverted. This is not perverse. This is not in any way pornographic. This is actually a pure practice. And she's saying, I desire to come under grace, and I would love for you to be my husband because you are the man that I have been looking for all my life. And God has blessed the broken road that has led me straight to you. And so, though it's peculiar to us, it is not at all peculiar. She's not the prostitute that's visiting the threshing floor. He knows her character. Now, it's all up to how he receives her. How is she going to receive this? It is, though it is it's a peculiar practice. It was customarily observed. How is he going to receive it? How is he going to perceive it? And again, that goes back to how he knows who Ruth is. He knows her character. How's she going to perceive him? Again, that's based on how he perceives her character. She is godly. She is worthy. She is a virtuous woman. And so this is, in fact, a proposal. Boaz is the answer to his own prayer, and he's the man that she's looking for, and so she proposes marriage. Look at verses 10 through 15. The next thing we see is proper priorities. It says, Then he said, May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. I could say this could be my life verse to Anna Catherine because I can relate to this perfectly. I remember when we were dating, she's at college, and I'm here, and I'm thinking the same thoughts. I'm just an old man. There's no way that this old man, this young woman, attractive woman, is going to fall in love with me, an old man miles away, especially when she's down there at college with a whole bunch of young bucks running around. And so here he looks at her, and he says, "May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter." Wow. I don't think I ever called her my daughter, but I've had people ask me before, "Is she my daughter?" And so Boaz is the same way. He says, "Bless you, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich." He's saying, you got it. I did love you. You caught it. Thank God. You saw what I was saying without saying. Now you're saying without saying, and I know what you're saying. Bless you, bless you, bless you for loving me. And then verse 11, "Now my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you ask, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence." So again, it's reinforced here. This is not an immoral, pornographic, perverted thing taking place. You're a woman of excellence. You're a woman of virtue. There's nothing naughty going on here. And so he's pointing that out as well, reinforcing it in our minds lest we think something we shouldn't think or go down a road we should not go. And he says, "Now it is true, I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I." And so we see that he's doing things properly. Though he's in love with her and she's in love with him, he knows the right thing to do is to give the person that's a closer relative, the one that's ahead of him, to fulfill this law of preserving the family line, of keeping the inheritance. He knows this, and he says, "There's a relative closer than I. Remain this night, and when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good. Let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you as the Lord lives." He gives a solemn vow. He gives a solemn promise. She makes a proposal. He says, "I promise you, I will marry you. If it all works out, I promise I'm going to do all that you've asked. I promise you that as the Lord lives." But then interestingly enough, he says, "Lie down until morning. Rest. Lie down until morning." Now, we know where she's laying down. She's laying down at his feet. She was laying down at his feet. Feet means feet. We know he's laying down at his feet. This was also a sign of humility. That was a sign of servanthood. She humbled herself, right? When Jesus washed the disciples' feet, it was a sign of humility and servanthood, right? She's laying at Boaz's feet. She's humbled herself. She even calls herself his servant in I believe, verse 9 or 10. And so she's humbling herself, and he says, "Sleep at my feet." Now, they've got a lot on their mind, right? She's been told this. She's in love with him. He's in love with her. And I know we're thinking, why all this? Wouldn't it have been a whole lot easier if he wrote a note and said, "Do you like me?" Check yes or check no. Instead of coming here at night, laying at my feet, uncovering my feet, asking this, it is a peculiar practice. She makes the proposal, yet we see Boaz's priorities are proper. And the title of the sermon is this, it's "Do the Right Thing." That's what we see Boaz doing. Boaz did the right thing. Now, here's a woman that comes to him at night. She's attractive. She's dressed up. They're alone. They're over here on the threshing floor. They can do whatever they want to do. They're adults, and here they are. And yet, she sleeps at his feet. He says, "I'm going to do the right thing at the right time, in the right order. And so remain, and if all these things take place, then I will fulfill this promise." And so we see that he does the right thing. He honors God. He's honoring the law. He's honoring what he knows to be true. He's honoring what God has commanded. He's honoring others, right? He's honoring the relative, the close relative. He's honoring Ruth. He's honoring Naomi. And then lastly, he's honoring himself. So we see the priorities are right. He's got God first. I do not want to sin against God and do something sinful with Ruth on the threshing floor tonight like the prostitutes are doing around here. I want to honor God. I want to honor her. And so it was God, and then others, and then himself last. And as I've told you this before, if we want application for this, we need to be doing the right thing in our life, obviously. We need to honor God above everything, others secondly, and put ourselves last. As I've said time and time again, put Jesus first in your life, others second in your life, and you, J-O-Y, Jesus, others, you, and you'll have joy in your life. And so that's what we see here. Proper priorities. Boaz had them, and we need to have them in our life as well. And so then look at verse 15, or verse 14. It says, so she lay at his feet until morning, and she rose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. Now, when I read this, I thought about that little song, Wake Up, Little Susie. And that's an older song. It wasn't in my day, but we could say, wake up, little Ruthie. Wake up, little Ruthie, wake up. We've both been sound asleep. And wake up, little Susie, and weep. The movie's over, the threshing's over, it's 4 o'clock, and we're in trouble deep. No, they weren't in trouble, but he says, get up before people see. Leave before people see. So he's concerned about the appearance of evil. He's concerned for her character. He says, let it not be known that this woman came to the threshing floor. So again, we see he's protecting her. And then next, we see he's again providing for her. He says, he gave me the cloak. Give me the cloak that's on your back and hold it. And so she held it, and she measured 6 measures of barley, and he laid it on her, and then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did it go, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done. Now, I also want to point this out. She did everything that Naomi had told her to do, but Naomi said, you do these things, uncover his feet and lay down, and then Boaz will tell you what to do, right? That was the one place where she veered from the plan. She couldn't hold it in. She says, here's what I'm here for. I want you to marry me. And so she took it a step further. She wasn't just a pawn in Naomi's hands. She loved Boaz, and she wanted to take it a step further. And so she let it be known. And she tells Boaz this. And then she comes back and she says, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said, do not go to your mother-in-law empty-handed. He told all that the man had done. And then she said, wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he has settled it today. And that leads me to the 4th point that we see here. Be patient in providence. That's what she says. Now wait. We've done all we can do. We've planned. You've done what I've asked. And now we wait on the Lord. Be patient. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. Again, Proverbs 16, 9, the mind of man plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps. And so she's saying, be patient in God's providence. He will work all of these things out for the ultimate good. So now, as we conclude, I want to look back quickly at these 4 things and say, well, what does all this have to say to us? Well, here's some things that we can glean from chapter 3 ourselves. Like Naomi and like Ruth, you can plan, make plans, right? We can plan, but like James 4:15 says, if the Lord wills, we will do this and that. And so we can say, Lord willing, I'm going to do this. If the Lord wills, I'll do that. We plan with hope, acknowledging that God is sovereign over our circumstances, that God is sovereign over our plans. And so we plan, and then we trust God with the results. And in the meantime, we be patient, right? So that's what we can glean here. The second thing we can see is to seek purity. Ruth sought purity. Boaz sought purity. They were people of character. We are to be, as Christians, countercultural. So the call here is to not be like the world. Sure, when the world would read this, they would want to make it a perverse thing, and they would mutate it and make it say something that it doesn't. And he says, no, if you're put in a situation like this, be pure. Sure, world would do that. You, as a believer, don't do that. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. Be like Ruth. Be like Boaz. Be pure. Be a woman of character. Be a man of righteousness. Be righteous. As 1 Peter 1:16 says, be holy, for God is holy. Be set apart. And so that's what we can see here. May we be like Boaz. Our boys and men be like Boaz, and our women and girls be like Ruth. And so seek purity in our life. Do the right thing. When easy. Now let me point it out. It would have been very easy for Ruth and Boaz to do the wrong thing that night, and yet they did the right thing. Could you imagine putting yourself in that position? And I would say, oh, we don't need to put ourselves in that position, but when it's easy to do the wrong thing, do the right thing. When it's hard to do the right thing, do the right thing. When you think no one's watching, do the right thing. When you know no one will ever know, still do the right thing. When you think nobody cares, you do the right thing because God does, and that's what we see Boaz saying, I want to do the right thing. Even though no one sees, no one knows, I want to do the right thing, Ruth. I want to protect you. I want to provide for you. I want to do the right thing at the right time, in the right order. And so I promise, as the Lord lives, I will do this. And so the call for us, again, is to be a person of integrity, be a person of character, because the Scripture says a good name is to be chosen over great riches. And so that's what we see here. Pursue purity. So plan, trust in God's providence, pursue purity, be a person of integrity, and then, again, lastly, have the right priorities. As Boaz had God first, others second, and himself last, in our life, put God first, put others second, and put yourself last. Do the right thing. Put the right things in the right order. Honor God, love others, love self. As Deuteronomy 6 says, and then Mark 5 says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And so there's the order. God first, others second, you last, and you will experience true joy in your life. So that's what we see here as we look at this. As we look at this purposeful plan, as we look at this peculiar practice, as we look at these proper priorities and patience in providence, we can do the same. We need to be like Boaz. We need to be like Ruth and not like the world. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. Your word is truth. God, we do live in a fallen world, a sinful world, and Lord, where purity, holiness is countercultural. But yet, God, you've called us to be set apart. You've called us to be holy. And so, Father, I pray that we will. God, where we have failed in our own lives to be pure, where we have failed in our own lives to be holy, where we have failed to honor you and to honor others and to do the right thing, where we've